Hello and welcome to Everyday Lessons Every Day. I'm David McBee. Based on my book, Everyday Lessons Every Day, A Journey from Grumpy to Grateful, this podcast is for those of us who believe in personal growth and want to improve every day. This is episode 5, Take a Ride. I am the father of 2 teenagers. My oldest, Tanner, is 19. He works full-time doing landscaping and lawn maintenance. Yes, he lives at home, and yes, he pays rent and several of his own bills. A future episode I have in mind will talk about teaching him financial literacy. More on that later. I also have a 14-year-old daughter who is a freshman in high school. If you read my book, you probably know all about Zoe. My editor pointed out that Zoe is mentioned in the book 56 times, compared to Tanner, who was mentioned only 12 times. She wondered if that might be hurtful to my son. Thing is, Tanner was away at summer camp and then college while I was writing Everyday Lessons Every Day. Not only that, at the time, Zoe had just started establishing her independence and was therefore, how should I say, more of a challenge at the time. Tanner challenged me a lot when he was 14 too. Boys are different from girls about how they challenge their parents. Or maybe it's just that Tanner and Zoe have very different personalities. But one thing that was the same with both of them. I went from being a jelly bean to a Brussels sprout. One day I was like candy. They couldn't get enough of me, wanting to hang out and wrestle and play. Then suddenly I was a gross vegetable. Something good for them, but that should be avoided. Thank you, Lisa Damour, author of Untangled, guiding teenage girls through the 7 transitions into adulthood, for this lovely analogy. It's not easy for a parent when their teen basically rejects them. One day your jokes are funny, the next day they're stupid and embarrassing. One day your advice is coveted, the next day it's smothering. One day they won't shut up about their day, and the next it's like pulling teeth to get them to tell you anything. For me, this transition was particularly hard. I love being a dad. Spending time with my family is my number one favorite thing to do. Think Chevy Chase and the vacation movies. I just want us to hang out and have fun and be together. I love to go camping or spend the weekend at the softball fields. I love cooking dinner together, sitting down to eat with no screens, talking about our days, and then plopping down on the couch to watch a movie as one big happy family. But as the kids have gotten older, finding common ground has been harder and harder. Hell, it's nearly impossible to find a movie or show that we're all interested in, let alone an activity we all like. In fact, our tastes are so different, it's become nearly impossible to find a restaurant we all enjoy. I can't count the number of times we've run through the Chick-fil-A drive-thru before going to Five Guys, or I've cooked dinner only to have my daughter pick at her plate, spreading the food around, so it looks like she's eaten more of it than she has, and then an hour later she's making ramen noodles. Today's everyday lesson is all about reconnecting with that teenage kid, getting them to open up and talk. And by the way, if you don't have a teen, this also works for couples. The lesson comes from Lisa Damour, whom I mentioned earlier with the awesome jelly bean analogy. In her book, Untangled, she suggests that spending time together in the car can be very valuable. She says, quote, "The conditions of riding in a car, not having to look directly at the parent who is driving, the assurance that the conversation will end when the ride ends, are just what some girls need to open up." I cannot tell you how true this is. As I record this, I have just returned from a ride with Zoe. We've been locked down for several days, thanks to the coronavirus, and she's been going stir crazy. So when it was time for lunch, I offered to take her out for drive-thru, if she promised to stay off of her phone. She agreed, and we headed out. When we got in the car, she immediately started talking. Without a phone to distract her, I was her only source of entertainment. I asked some pretty specific questions about how she was feeling about school being canceled and not getting to see her friends. She opened up to me and the conversation flowed. We talked about school and friends, but then we also talked about politics. After that, she shared a Bible quote that she saw on social media, and we discussed God and religion. I was amazed to find out how my little girl was starting to develop her own thoughts and feelings about such important subjects. We talked about boys and her relationship with her older brother, and I even told her some personal things about myself that I thought she was finally old enough to know. We were in the car for about a half an hour, and we got along famously the whole time. Without screens, without music, without other people around, it was just her and I, and it was some of the best quality time we've had together in weeks. This isn't new territory for me. I've always enjoyed driving. You will likely hear me talk about Jeep therapy because there's a special feeling that comes with taking the top down, putting Green Day on the stereo, and just cruising. When Emily and I first got married and we didn't have money for nice dinners or fancy activities, we would often just go for a ride, listening to our favorite music, holding hands and talking. When my son got older and spent most of his spare time playing video games, going for a drive with him was like taking the cap off of a shaken bottle of soda. It was his time to open up and tell me what was on his mind or happening in his life. If I remember correctly, I gave the big talk, the one about birds and bees, to both of my kids while we were driving. It was perfect because they couldn't retreat to their rooms or really even get away from me if they wanted to. They were stuck, a captive audience that had to listen and frankly participate in the conversation, or I might just threaten to keep driving. Just kidding, I wouldn't do that. Or maybe I would. The point is, the car has turned out to be this wonderful little sanctuary where my family opens up to me. It's almost like magic, and it's probably one of my favorite everyday lessons of all time. And so, I challenge you, get out a Sharpie and write the word ride on your wrist. If you're struggling to connect with your kids or your spouse or even a friend, offer to take them out for ice cream. Request that they stay off their phone. Take the long way getting there. Find a reason to run some additional errands while you're out. Ask questions that are specific enough that your passenger feels like you are really interested in them. Then, shut up and listen as they open up in a way that may surprise you. Let me know what happens when you implement this lesson. I'll see you next time. Now go out there and do something awesome.